I have a quick question. What do you think you were actually sitting around feeling anxious about? Or were you not even able to verbalize that and figure that part out?
I think just eating, sleeping, and breathing as an 18-year-old girl is enough of an explanation of being anxious. A lot of times we feel anxious and there's no explicit trigger for it.
Mhm.
And sometimes searching for a specific trigger can make it even worse because you start thinking to yourself, I don't know what's wrong with me. And then you sit and you ruminate about what's happening to you when literally just being a human being is enough of a reason for being anxious. And I think it just got much worse and it brought out those OCD symptoms when I saw my friend at the pumpkin patch.
I think that's really important to address because so many people sit around and they say, well, it can't be a panic attack because I don't know I don't have a test tomorrow. It's
Right.
not something that I can have a tangible answer to. And you're saying, no, you can have generalized anxiety.
Yeah.
Anxiety can just consume you, and it doesn't have to be about one thing that you're anxious about in the future or in the past.
Exactly. The reality is so many of us have anxiety that isn't latched on to anything in particular. A
Mhm.
lot of us have panic attacks tied to specific events, but you could also just be sitting around and doing nothing. And when we're lonely and doing nothing, like I was during the pandemic, we're forced to look inwards and we're ruminating about our lives and our purpose and our futures and
Yeah.
just sitting there as a human being who goes through life is enough of a reason to have a panic attack.
Right. So at what point did you decide to pick up a pen and start writing for Mindfire?
Well, when I was in therapy, I was instructed to journal a lot because, my therapist knew that writing is something really important to me. It's a great coping mechanism for anyone. So I would just diary what I was feeling in an attempt to almost like make sense of what was going through my mind.
Mhm.
And I wasn't planning on publishing it until probably 2022, like a few years later. I was in school and I felt a panic attack coming on, and I didn't want to talk to my mom because I didn't think she'd understand. I knew my friend didn't understand. My therapist would only like make me pay for a session. So there just felt like there was nowhere to turn and nobody would understand. So I almost got angry. I said, I want to make people understand what this feels like. There's no representation like this of mental health in the media. There are the hashtags, hashtag mental health matters, but there are no real people coming out and sharing their stories about what they're
Mhm.
going through. So that's when I started putting those diaries that I'd written over those past 2 years together and formulating it into a book. And not just a pity me book where I'm just pouring out all of my woes and anxiety, but I made it into this really powerful tool that people can use as a guidebook to navigating their anxiety with tangible advice that I use to get through specific situations.
So I'm curious how this approach helped you convey a message because if you're writing and showing your diary, is there a turning point for you where you're saying, okay, well now I'm getting myself out of it? Like how do you get the
Yeah,
message out?
I think naturally when I was writing these diary entries, I was trying to help myself.
Mm,
So at the end of the diary, I would say, okay, here's what I'm going to do now. I'm going
I
to use
see.
my five senses and ground myself to reality. I'm going to sit down and write some more. I'm going to go on a run. So I was making sense of it at the same time that I was writing about these woes. So I realized that not only was it helping me, but in sharing what helped me with other people, I could help other people as well. Even
Right.
like I've been talking to a lot of sororities lately about the book and how this tool can help them. And I've heard so many people just sharing their personal stories and just feeling empowered to spark the conversation about mental health because there's enough science out there, there's enough data. But these girls, these, sorority sisters keep telling me they've just been looking for someone to relate to feel less alone. That
Right.
relatability is so much more powerful than the reassurance you get from statistics.
100%. The title Mindfire is really evocative. Like how did you explain its significance? How'd you come up with it?
Yeah. So Mindfire, I thought of this feeling of when I'm feeling really anxious, it often feels like my brain is on fire and
Mhm.
swarming with intrusive thoughts and just feeling so heavy and hot. And I feel like a lot of people could relate to that feeling. So I
Mhm.
initially liked Brain on Fire, but brain sounded too
Mhm.
scientific, and I didn't want that. I'm projecting myself as like a real girl, so I didn't want it
Mhm.
to be too scientific. So then I thought Mind on Fire, and that was like too wordy. I thought Girl on Fire, but that sounded like Alicia Keys.
Oh
So
yeah.
I took Mind and Fire and I just put it together and almost coined a term of my own, Mind Fire.
Right. That's amazing. Um, okay, so what are some of the coping mechanisms or strategies you found helpful in managing anxiety? The one that I keep seeing throughout your Instagram or your social media, you seem like you love to run.
Oh yeah.
So is that something that has always helped you cope, or it's something you had to learn how to do to cope?
I took up running in 2020. I talk about it a lot in my book, how fitness is really a form of medicine for you almost. Movement is
Yeah.
medicine, and moving your body can just clear your mind in such an amazing way. So in
Yeah.
2020, I was never a runner. I was a dancer my whole life, but
Mhm.
dance studios shut down during the pandemic. There was nothing really to do. And one day I started running and it was really hard, but I liked the challenge. So I kept going and going until I mastered like 3 miles. And then I just kept running. Like I was in Long Island during the pandemic and there was this long road at the beach and I would just run to the end of the beach and back. And during that time, it just felt like my intrusive thoughts were a little quieter and I was just very free. And
Hmm.
it was, I don't know, it was beautiful. And I came home and the thoughts would return, but for like an hour, I was okay again. And it was just very meditative.
What would you say to the people that are having issues and feel like they have no energy to get up though and be physical, or their thoughts are really preventing them from getting out of bed?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think you gotta give yourself a kick in the butt. You don't have to run marathons like
Right.
I do. I turned myself into a marathoner. I was crazy. I just fell in love with it. But it could be something as simple as just getting out of bed and taking a walk around your living room or taking a walk around the block. And if you don't want to move, just choosing one thing to be productive that day. I always say
Mm.
turn pain into productivity. So that could be if it's children or, you know, teenagers or college students, getting a homework assignment done early or doing something extra for work, going the extra mile for work, or preparing your meals ahead of time, meal prep.
Mhm.
Like there are so
Yeah.
many things you could do. Cleaning your house, just one thing, and forcing yourself to do that is going to ground you to the present, which brings me to another great coping mechanism, which is using your five senses to ground yourself to the present. Naming five things you can see, hear, smell, etc. Because even though it feels silly in the moment, it's going to bring you back to the present when
Mm.
oftentimes we're so stuck inside our heads.